Trump leaned forward, gripping the microphone as though it were a weapon. His voice boomed through the chamber, thick with bravado. "The people love me. I built the greatest economy this nation has ever seen. No one has done more for America than Donald J. Trump." The words landed heavy. Rehearsed applause trickled from a few loyalists in the back rows, but it was drowned almost immediately by a wave of boos. The sound cut like broken glass, sharp and unrelenting. Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. She allowed the nose to crest, her eyes never leaving Trump's face. Then she opened her folder, slid a single sheet across the desk, and spoke in a voice low but lethal. 34 million Americans will lose health care under your plan. 62% of them are children. Gasps rippled through the lights of Capitol Hill burned brighter than ever, not just for Congress, but for the millions of eyes glued to screens across America. C-SPAN cameras swung left to right, catching every detail: the gleam of the polished mahogany desk, the uneasy shuffling of aides, and the restless crowd packed into the gallery. They weren't silent spectators. They were angry citizens with fists tight around placards reading, "Answer the question, you coward, and justice belongs to the people." Their chants rose like a storm cloud, muffled only by the gavel's hollow thud echoing across the chamber. For one electric moment, the room didn't feel like a legislative body, it felt like an arena, primed for combat. The atmosphere carried a heavy weight, a tension so thick it made even the marble columns appear to tremble. Journalists scribbled frantically, whispering about whether tonight would make or break not only careers, but the very credibility of Congress itself. Behind the cameras, producers counted down, feeding lines into Anka's ears. "Stay with us, America. This is the moment you've been waiting for." And then silence hit, a silence more terrifying than any chant, because everyone knew what was at stake. Medicaid cuts, rising costs, children left without care, entire families at the brink. It wasn't just policy, it was survival. Into this silence, the doors swung open. A ripple shot through the crowd. Some hissed, others booed. Donald Trump walked in, flanked by Republican allies Barry Moore, Mark Alford, and Warren Davidson. The former president's trademark smirk flashed under the bright lights, but it looked thinner now, more forced. He raised his hand as if to wave off the nose, but the chants only grew louder. 34 million Americans abandoned. 21 hospitals closed, 62% of children left without care. And on live television, inside the U.S. Capitol, Donald Trump froze for 52 agonizing seconds as Jasmine Crockett stood face to face with him. And for Republican enforcers, the crowd erupted. "Answer the question, you coward," echoing like thunder through the chamber. Rage, humiliation, and truth collided in a moment so explosive it felt less like politics and more like America's fight for survival. Was this the night power cracked, or the night justice finally rose? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. As she reached her seat, the tension felt unbearable. Some wondered aloud if tonight would descend into another shouting match, a theater of insults and evasions. But others whispered that something different was in the air, something raw and dangerous, because this wasn't a closed-door session. This was America watching, the whole nation waiting to see if one woman's voice could hold a man who once held the presidency accountable. And then came the question, lingering like a spark before the explosion: will the people finally be heard tonight, or silenced again? Trump settled into his chair with the swagger of a man who had never been forced to answer a question he didn't want to. But tonight, the arrogance looked brittle, almost theatrical. At his flank sat Barry Moore, face flushed as if he'd just walked out of the Alabama town hall where voters screamed false, shame, shame, in his ears. To Trump's right, Mark Alford kept his jaw clenched, haunted by the words that had chased him out of Missouri. "Get your head out of Trump's, eh?" Warren Davidson, stiff in his seat, tried to mask the memory of Ohio constituents booing him into silence. And then there was Susan Collins, who had expected a ribbon-cutting photo op but instead faced the shame of being cornered by her own neighbors after 25 years without a single town hall. For allies, for ghosts trailing into this chamber, each one dragging the weight of outrage behind them, the montage played on the overhead screens raw, unedited clips of the people they swore to represent. Faces twisted in anger, voices rising in unison. "Answer the question, you coward." Chants echoed from Maine to Alabama, Ohio to Missouri. One woman in tears, clutching her child's inhaler, shouted about losing Medicaid. A veteran, sleeves rolled up to reveal scars of combat, demanded why his benefits were being stripped. Each clip landed like a hammer, pounding into the marble walls of the Capitol, breaking through the rehearsed calm of the Republican bench. It was no longer just policy, it was betrayal captured on tape. Trump tried to smirk through it, but the crowd saw it. The smirk was trembling, every chant carried the same rhythm, pounding into his ears, shaking the very foundation of his myth. Coward. 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 Moore shifted in his seat, gripping the desk until his knuckles whitened. Alfred whispered something into Davidson's ear, but even their words sounded like excuses, fragile and hollow. Collins sat rigid, lips pressed together, as though she could swallow the humiliation and bury it under silence. But the silence tonight didn't belong to them, it belonged to the voters. Cameras zoomed in, catching every twitch, every bead of sweat. This was no longer the untouchable party of power. This was a line of officials cornered by their own people, trapped in a spotlight they couldn't dim. The arrogance that once insulated them now cracked like glass, and behind it was the raw truth. They were losing control, and if they couldn't control the crowd outside, how would they withstand Jasmine Crockett inside? The room pulsed with unease, reporters scribbled frantically, headlines already forming, Republicans crumble. Under voter fury, the audience leaned forward, waiting, sensing that Jasmine's moment was coming, that she would take these broken fragments of public outrage and hurl them like daggers across the chamber. Tonight wasn't just another hearing. Tonight was judgment, and the first blows had already landed. And as the last clip of a voter screaming "Shame on you all" dissolved into silence, the question lingered in every heart watching. When power trembles before its own people, who will dare to strike the final blow? The chamber door opened again. And this time the air shifted. No roar of chants, no defensive applause, just a silence sharp enough to cut glass. Jasmine Crockett stepped inside, her heels striking against the marble floor with a rhythm that overpowered the murmurs. She held no entourage, no shield of loyalists, only a heavy stack of reports and a black folder tucked under her arm. The cameras pivoted instantly, abandoning Trump and his allies, as though instinctively pulled toward her. Even before she spoke, her presence demanded the stage. The audience leaned forward, some holding their breath. They had seen politicians walk into this building countless times, but this was different. Jasmine did not enter like a lawmaker preparing for debate. She entered like a prosecutor walking into court, evidence in hand, eyes locked on the accused. Every step seemed to echo with a question: if not me, then who? If not now, then when? Trump shifted in his seat. For the first time all evening, the smirk faltered. He whispered something to Barry Moore, but the microphone caught the tremor in his tone. Jasmine kept moving, her gaze cutting across the chamber. Like a blade, Alfred tried not to meet her eyes. Davidson fiddled with his notes. Collins sat frozen. The people in the gallery erupted into murmurs, cell phones raised to capture the moment. This was not just politics, it was theater, and Jasmine had just claimed the role of leading actor. She placed the folder on the table with deliberate force. Papers spilled slightly, revealing chart. Jasmine didn't let the nose fade. She seized it. With one swift motion, she slammed a stack of documents onto the desk so hard the sound cracked like a gunshot. Pages spilled forward, charts and testimonies sliding into the spotlight. She pointed at them with the precision of a prosecutor. That's a lie, Mr. Moore. These aren't numbers I invented. These are government reports, your reports, confirming millions will be cut off. 34 million Americans gone from the rolls, children, veterans, seniors. And you stand here pretending it's about citizenship. The gallery rose as one, voices fusing into a single deafening roar. LIAR, liar, LIAR. The chant thundered through the chamber like a war drum, relentless, primal, impossible to ignore. Moore's face flushed crimson. He glanced helplessly at Trump, but Trump looked away, unwilling to tether himself to the sinking ship beside him. Cameras zoomed in on Moore's trembling hand, caught in 4K for every household in America to see. Jasmine leaned closer, her voice sharp enough to slice through the chaos. Tell that mother in Ohio who begged for insulin. Tell that veteran in Alabama who lost his benefits. Tell Tell that farmer in Missouri who can't afford treatment for his sick child. Tell them it's about citizenship. Look them in the eye and say it. Moore's lips moved but no words came. The crowd's chant swallowed him whole. A wave of righteous fury he could not outshout, could not escape. Davidson tried to intervene, raising his hand to steady the room, but the cameras betrayed him. Two pulling clips of his own constituents doing him in town halls. Alfred shook his head, muttering under his breath, while Susan Collins sat stone-faced, her silence more damning than any admission. It was a tableau of collapse, one by one, the defenders of the party crumbling. Jasmine didn't flinch, her eyes locked onto Trump's with the intensity of a blade meeting steel. She leaned into the microphone, her tone steady, her words sharp enough to slice the tension in half. If defending children makes me a disgrace, then what does that make you, Mr. Trump? A savior, or a coward hiding behind lies? The chamber froze. For the first time that night, even the chants halted, as though the audience needed silence to absorb the blow. Trump blinked, his mouth opening but no words following. He glanced toward Barrymore, toward Davidson, toward Collins seeking backup, seeking approval but found only hollow faces and lowered eyes. His smirk faltered, the aura of invincibility cracking like shattered glass. The cameras zoomed closer, catching every flicker of weakness, every bead of sweat sliding down his temple. The image would be replayed 1,000 times before midnight, the moment Donald Trump, once untouchable, stared down the barrel of a truth he couldn't dodge. The crowd sensed blood. They erupted again, chants ricocheting off the chamber walls. Coward, coward, coward. The sound was deafening, primal, like a nation screaming its judgment all at once. Jasmine raised her hand and the room obeyed, falling back into silence, her command over the chaos undeniable. She leaned forward, her voice low but carrying the gravity of thunder. This chamber is filled with men who boast about power but tremble before the truth. And you, Mr. Trump, are their leader. You call me a disgrace. No, sir. You are the disgrace of a nation that trusted you, the disgrace of families you betrayed, the disgrace of children you abandoned. Her words struck like a verdict. Trump slammed his fist again, shouting, but his voice was drowned in the roar of the gallery. The microphones crackled, his anger reduced to noise without meaning. He tried to stand, but the gavel hammered down, forcing him back into his seat, his rage smothered by procedure and humiliation. The image was seared into history, the mighty brought low, the coward exposed, and as the crowd rose, chanting Jasmine's name in unison, the question hung heavy over every viewer across America. Impossible to escape. Can one woman's voice truly drown out a chamber of cowards, or has this battle only just begun? Jasmine did not waste a second. With one precise motion, she slid a USB into the console and the giant screen behind her flickered to life. The chamber dimmed, and suddenly the walls of Congress became a theater of reckoning. The first clip rolled. Mark Alfred standing stiff at a Missouri town hall. His voice trembled as he tried to deflect a voter's question about Medicaid. But then it came, loud and unfiltered, from the back of the room. Get your head out of Trump, say. The words struck like a lightning bolt. Gasps burst through the chamber, followed by laughter, followed by the low rumble of rage relived. The cameras caught Alfred's face live now, pale and twitching, the insult replaying on the screen, in front of him like an unending nightmare. Before the no settled, Jasmine clicked again. Ohio lit up the screen. Warren Davidson stood at a podium, hands raised to calm his constituents, but it was useless. The boos came hard and relentless, drowning every word, until one man shouted, "Don't lie to us." The crowd joined in, a chorus of betrayal that surged like a tidal wave. Inside the chamber, Davidson's eyes flicked to the floor, jaw locked, shoulders rigid as the echoes of his humiliation filled the air once more. He had no defense now. The evidence was playing out larger than life, and America was watching. Then, the third clip. Maine, Susan Collins, smiling stiffly at a ribbon cutting, scissors in hand. When suddenly voices tore through the polite veneer. Shame, shame on you. The scene unraveled quickly, her attempt to smile, to wave it off, collapsing into visible discomfort as residents surrounded her. In the chamber now, Collins sat frozen, her face flushed under the spotlight. There was nowhere to hide. Her shame had been immortalized, and Jasmine had made sure the nation would not forget. The audience in the gallery could no longer contain themselves. They erupted like a volcano, cheers mixing with anger, reliving the fury of every town hall betrayal. Some pounded the railings, others screamed the very same words echoing from the cliffs. Answer the question. Shame, coward. The noise was overwhelming, primal, shaking the very bones of the Capitol. The Republicans shifted in their seats, trapped in a theater of their own failures, unable to rewrite what the cameras had already carved into history. Jasmine stood silently, her arms folded, her gaze sweeping the chamber as if daring anyone to deny what they had seen. The silence of the GOP was louder than any protest. They sat in their own collapse, their arrogance burned away by the raw heat of evidence. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos with surgical precision. These are not my words. These are your people. This is America, speaking to you in towns, in streets, in schools, in hospitals. And if you will not answer them, then you do not deserve to sit in these chairs. The chamber fell into a heavy hush, every eye fixed on Trump, every camera trained on the man who had once. The C-SPAN cameras captured it all, sweeping from the furious crowd to the faces of the powerful. Donald Trump sat rigid, his complexion pale beneath the bright lights. His jaw clenched, his hand gripped the edge of the desk until his knuckles whitened. For years, he had thrived on nose-on rallies, on chance, on the frenzied devotion of supporters. But this was different. This wasn't adoration. It was rage, naked and undeniable, aimed squarely at him. For the first time, the cameras caught it. Trump wasn't feeding off the chaos. He was suffocating in it. His allies squirmed like trapped animals. Derry Moore kept shifting in his seat, fumbling with his tie, eyes darting toward the exits, as though calculating escape. Mark Alford leaned back, muttering prayers under his breath, his face slick with sweat. Warren Davidson rubbed his temples, trying to disappear into the leather of his chair, while Susan Collins stared fixedly at her lap, refusing to meet the cameras head-on. One by one, their masks of confidence crumbled, the polished veneer of power stripped bare by 30 relentless seconds of public fury. The noise inside the chamber was deafening, but it wasn't chaos, it was judgment. The chants had rhythm, fury shaped into unity, a collective indictment of betrayal. Staffers rushed to the edges, whispering frantically into earpieces, but there was no controlling the crowd now. This was no longer a hearing. It was a reckoning. The marble walls of the Capitol had become a mirror, reflecting the anger of a nation back onto those who once thought themselves untouchable. And through it all, Jasmine Crockett remained standing, silent but commanding, her presence amplifying the chants without saying a word. She didn't need to shout. The people were shouting for her. The cameras swung back to her face, calm, fierce, resolute, the embodiment of the storm Trump could not weather. Every second that passed eroded his aura further. Every chant carved deeper into the myth of invincibility he had built around himself. At last the chant tapered, not because the anger faded, but because the crowd hungered for what came next. The silence returned, heavier than before, as if the entire nation was holding its breath. All eyes turned to Trump, waiting to see if he would answer, waiting to see if he could still summon the fire that once set stadiums ablaze. And in that silence, a question cut through the chamber sharper than any gavel, impossible to escape. When the voice of the people roars in unison, does even the strongest empire collapse under its own fear? The chants faded into an uneasy stillness, like thunder, retreating after a storm. Every camera in the chamber pivoted to Jasmine. She didn't rush, she didn't need to. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on. The crowd leaned forward, cell phones raised, recording the spectacle that no one believed possible. Donald Trump, the man who never stopped talking, the man who weaponized words into shields and swords, left speechless. His face shifted, first defiance, then discomfort, then something closer to fear. Sweat gleamed under the lights. The cameras captured every twitch, every blink, every desperate swallow. Jasmine stood still, arms folded, her silence louder than any insult. She let the moment stretch, refusing to interrupt, refusing to give him an escape. This wasn't just politics anymore, it was a trial, and Trump was on the stand with nothing to say. 35 seconds, 36, 37, the chamber clock struck the mark, and the room erupted, the silence breaking like a dam. Reporters gasped audibly, their pens flying, headlines already etched into history. Trump frozen for 37 seconds on live TV. The gallery exploded again, chants surging back with volcanic force. Coward, coward, coward. Some pounded the railings, others stomped the floor until the chamber vibrated under their fury. The sound was no longer protest, it was a verdict, a collective roar that drowned every excuse before it could be spoken. Trump looked to his allies for rescue, but none met his eyes. Moore hunched low, Alfred wiped sweat from his brow, Davidson pressed his hands over his face, and Collins sat stiff as stone. They were witnesses, not saviors. His empire of enablers had crumbled into silence with him. Jasmine raised her hand. The crowd obeyed. The chants fell away. Her voice returned, quiet but sharp enough to pierce the air. The people demanded an answer, and all you gave them was silence. Perhaps silence is the only truth you have left. Her words lingered, heavy and haunting, searing themselves into every mind watching. And as Trump sat frozen, his silence now immortal, a single question roared louder than the crowd itself. Will silence protect him from the truth, or will it be the weapon that finally destroys him? The chamber was still vibrating from Trump's silence when Susan Collins leaned toward her microphone, her voice trembling but coated with practiced politeness. I have always served my constituents with dignity. I have always listened to the people of Maine. It was the kind of line she had repeated for decades, soft, measured, carefully packaged for television. But tonight, the audience didn't buy it. A low murmur of discontent rippled through the gallery, then swelled into open laughter. The words sounded hollow, a fragile mask on a crumbling face. Jasmine didn't let it slide. With the same deliberate calm that had already dismantled Trump, she reached into her folder and pulled out another document, then pressed a button on the console. The overhead screen flickered to life again, projecting headlines in bold letters for the entire nation to see. Collins hasn't held a town hall in 25 years. Beneath it, video clips rolled, angry Maine residents confronting cameras, shouting that their senator was nowhere to be found. Footage of Collins smiling stiffly at ribbon cuttings while ignoring pointed questions. Audio of voters chanting shame, shame on you. At her last public event, the reaction in the chamber was immediate and brutal. Those crashed down like thunder, some in the audience rising to their feet, waving placards that read, "Where were you?" The sound was deafening, but Jasmine's voice cut through it with precision. You say you listen, Senator. These are your people. They begged for answers, and you gave them silence. They demanded accountability, and you gave them photo ops. 25 years without a single town hall that is not listening, that is running. Collins froze, her face tight with panic, hands clasped together as though clinging to composure. The camera zoomed in mercilessly, catching every twitch in her eyes, every nervous swallow. She tried to interject, "That's not entirely accurate." But Jasmine slammed a receipt onto the desk, her voice rising, fueled by the fury of those who had been ignored. "Here are your records, Senator. Public schedules, attendance logs, press statements. 25 years, 0 town halls. These aren't my numbers. They're yours." The gallery erupted into applause so thunderous it shook the walls. The sound wasn't just approval, it was vindication, a release of years of frustration finally voiced in the highest chamber of the land. Jasmine let it wash over her, then raised her hand, commanding silence once more. She turned back to Collins, her tone quieter now, but sharper, more devastating. The people of Maine didn't ask for excuses, they asked for your presence, they asked for your courage, and you gave them absence. Collins lowered her gaze, unable to meet Jasmine's eyes, unable to meet the cameras, unable to meet the judgment of the very people she claimed to serve. The image was damning. A senator exposed not by partisan attacks, but by her own neglect, by the voices of her constituents amplified for the world to hear. And as Jasmine stepped back, letting the silence hang like a blade suspended in the air, one question burned across the chamber and into every home in America. When the cracks of hypocrisy finally split wide open, do they reveal a leak? The chamber was still buzzing from the humiliation of Collins, and Mark Alford suddenly lurched forward, his voice cutting through the tension like a serrated blade. His face was flushed, his fists clenched against the desk, his eyes burning with desperation. "You're nothing but a puppet, Jasmine," he barked, his words ricocheting off the marble walls. "A puppet of the Democrats, a puppet of the media, a puppet of every radical who wants to destroy this country." The outburst was raw, uncontrolled, more plea than argument, but it was loud enough to jolt the audience into silence for a split second. Then the murmur started low, mocking, like a storm rumbling just beneath the surface. Jasmine didn't react with anger. Instead, She let a slow smile curve across her face, a smile that cut deeper than any shout. She leaned forward, resting her hand on the pile of documents she had already weaponized, and answered with words so sharp they pierced the air like glass. Better a puppet of the people than a slave to Trump. The effect was instant. The gallery erupted, cheers bursting like fireworks, drowning the chamber in sound. Some rose to their feet, clapping, stomping, shouting her name. Others chanted "Puppet of the People," in unison, reclaiming the insult and twisting it into a badge of honor. The sound was electric, unstoppable, and the cameras captured it all: the crowd, the signs, the pounding fists, the wide shot of Alfred's face as he realized he had stepped into a trap of his own making. He tried to shout back, but the words caught in his throat. His lips moved, but the chance swallowed everything. He slammed his papers shut, the sound lost in the chaos. His allies glanced at him, but none offered support. Trump kept his eyes fixed on the desk, unwilling to tie his fate to Alfred's collapse. Davidson stared straight ahead. Collins kept her head down, and Moore looked as though he might bolt at any second. The chants grew louder, echoing through the chamber like a drumbeat of justice. Puppet of the people. Puppet of the people. The phrase became a weapon, each repetition another blow against the man who had dared to wield arrogance against truth. Alfred's face twisted with fury, but his fury only revealed his weakness. Finally, with his composure shattered, Alfred shoved his chair back so hard it screeched across the floor. He gathered his notes in a trembling hand and stormed toward the exit, his steps fast, frantic, or retreat masquerading as defiance. The cameras followed, catching the back of his suit as the gallery booed him out of sight. The door slammed shut. Behind him, the sound final, like a gavel sealing his fate. The chamber quieted, the echoes of his collapse lingering in the marble air. Jasmine remained seated, calm and unshaken, her smile gone now, replaced with something sharper: resolve. She had not just silenced a man, she had dismantled a shield of power. And as the audience leaned forward again, breathless, one question reverberated louder than Alfred's exit. If one voice could drive a congressman to flee in shame, what storm awaited the man at the center of it all? The echo of Alfred's slammed door still lingered in the chamber when Jasmine rose again, her voice calm yet cutting like the edge of a blade. She didn't turn to the cameras, more to the audience, her eyes locked squarely on the man who once. The Republicans flanking him looked away. Moore's face drained of color. Davidson rubbed his temples as if in pain. Collins stared into the void, her shame still fresh, while Alfred's empty chair sat like a tombstone marking his collapse. Trump had never looked so alone. The chants began again, rising like a storm. Answer, answer, answer. The crowd pounded the railings, their voices sensing in rhythm with the gavel's futile pounding. For the first time, Trump wasn't controlling the chant, he was drowning in it. Jasmine leaned in, her voice softer now, but sharper than ever. For years, you've hidden behind slogans, you've hidden behind fear, but tonight, Mr. Trump, there's no curtain left to pull. You call yourself strong, yet here you are, cornered by the truth, terrified of silence, terrified of the people you swore to serve. She paused, letting the words hover, letting the nation absorb the image of Trump shrinking before the woman who refused to bend. Trump's hand shook as he reached for his glass, spilling water down the papers in front of him. He barked into the microphone, his voice cracking. This is a witch hunt, a disgrace, a fraud. But each word felt thinner than the last, shredded by the weight of the crowd's roar. He slammed the desk again, desperate for control. But every blow made him look smaller, weaker, less a commander than a man grasping for air in a chamber that no longer obeyed him. Jasmine did not answer his outburst. She stood still, her silence more powerful than any rebuttal, her presence towering over his chaos. The cameras lingered on the image, a strong man unraveling, his fury exposed for what it was: not strength, but fear dressed in nose. And as the gavel hammered to restore order, the question pressed itself into the hearts of millions watching. What happens when a strong man runs out of strength and the only power left belongs to the people? The chamber teetered on the edge of collapse, and then it snapped. A man in the gallery shot to his feet, his voice cracking the silence like a whip. Shame. Another rose beside him, then another, until dozens stood shoulder to shoulder, fists raised, shouting in unison. Shame, shame, shame. The chant grew, swelling into a wall of sound that shook the marble pillars and rattled the glass panes above. 52 seconds, not a heartbeat less. For nearly a full minute, the word crashed down like a hammer with every breath, every syllable striking harder than the one before. C-SPAN camera swung wildly, capturing the sea of faces, angry mothers clutching photos of children who had lost coverage, veterans pounding the railing with scarred fists, students holding up cardboard signs scrawled in black ink, "We deserve better." Their voices fused into something primal, something that no gavel could silence, no speech could dilute. The chamber had ceased to be a legislative body. It had become a tribunal, the people sitting in judgment over those who once claimed to lead them. Security rushed in, their suits cutting through the chaos, earpieces buzzing with frantic orders. They moved toward the gallery, hands raised, urging the crowd to sit. But Jasmine lifted her palm, her voice clear, commanding, echoing above the chant without strain. "Let them speak." The officers froze, glancing at each other, unsure. The chant thundered on, filling every second of those 50 to like a drumbeat of justice. For once, power didn't belong to the men behind the desk. It belonged to the people in the seats above them. Trump hunched forward, his knuckles pressed hard into the wood, his face contorted with rage he could no longer disguise. He mouthed something. "Sit them down, shut them up," but his microphone was dead, his words lost in the avalanche. More white sweat from his brow. With a trembling hand, Davidson buried his face in his palms. Collins stared into nothingness, her lips moving soundlessly like a prayer. Their collapse wasn't loud, it was quiet, defeated, hollow. While above them, the people roared with a fury that had been stifled for years. Jasmine didn't move, didn't waver. Jasmine placed the letter down, then lifted another. "This one is from a farmer in Missouri. He writes, 'I have tilled the same land my father and grandfather did. I pay my taxes, I feed this nation, but without Medicaid, I cannot pay for my wife's chemotherapy. Do you know what it feels like, watching her die in pieces while politicians brag about greatness?'" The chamber gasped as though struck. To farmers, words weren't statistics, they were wounds laid bare for the world to see. Finally, Jasmine held up a photograph. A soldier in uniform, his arm missing below the elbow, his face weary but proud. This veteran from Alabama wrote, "I fought for this country, but now my country tells me I don't deserve care. I didn't lose my arm for a tax cut, I didn't bleed for a slogan. I bled for America, and America is betraying me." The chamber fell silent, not the silence of hesitation. This was the silence of grief, of anger too deep to voice. For one suspended moment, even the chant ceased. All that remained was the sound of Jasmine's voice echoing in the hearts of millions watching from their living rooms. Then Trump leaned forward, lips curled into a sneer. "Fake stories, all of them. Probably written by the Democrats, probably actors. It's pathetic." He didn't finish. The boos came instantly, louder than before, rolling like thunder across the chamber. "Boo!" roared the gallery. Some shouted disgrace, others screamed liar. The sound was deafening, merciless, drowning his words, leaving him visibly rattled, his bravado shrinking under the weight of rage he couldn't control. Jasmine didn't look at him. She didn't need to. She lifted the photo of the veteran high above her head, her eyes blazing as she turned to the audience. "These are not Democrats or Republicans. These are Americans, nurses, farmers, veterans, families who believed in this country and were betrayed by the very man who promised them everything. Their blood, their sweat, their tears are real, and so is their pain. This is who you are mocking when you call them fake." The gallery erupted in applause so fierce it shook the chamber to its foundation. Some chanted "USA, USA," reclaiming the cry Trump once owned, now aimed like a blade at him. The camera zoomed in tight, capturing Jasmine standing tall, the photo still raised, the crowd behind her thundering in unity. And as Trump sat frozen, drowned in the roar of the people, one question burned like fire through the Capitol and across the nation. When the lies are unmasked and the people finally see the truth, can even the loudest voice of power survive the sound of justice rising? The chamber was still shaking from the roar of boos when Jasmine stepped forward, the veteran's photograph still in her hand. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't pound the desk, she let the weight of her words carve through the chaos like a blade through silk. "You're not fighting me, Mr. Trump." Trump could take no more. His chair screeched against the marble as he lurched forward, his face flushed crimson, spit catching at the corner of his mouth as he hammered his fist into the desk. "She's unqualified," he barked, his voice cracking but wild, a fraud, an embarrassment to Congress, an embarrassment to America. Each insult hurled like a stone, desperate, venomous, meant to shatter the woman standing across from him. His words bounced off the chamber walls, hollow, echoes of a man who once thrived on domination, but now sounded more like a cornered animal lashing out. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even some of his own allies winced, the ugliness of the attack too raw, too revealing. The gallery buzzed with anger, shouts rising from the rafters, but Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she leaned back slightly, a laugh escaping her lips, sharp, deliberate, disarming. It wasn't the laugh of dismissal. It was the laugh of someone who had already won. Her eyes narrowed, her smile cutting like a blade. "Dead or unqualified in your eyes, Mr. Trump, then. Unworthy in histories." The words detonated in the chamber like dynamite. The audience roared, their applause and chants shaking the room with a force no gavel could control. The camera zoomed in, catching Trump's face as it twisted from rage into something closer to fear. A flicker, brief but undeniable. Jasmine pressed on, her voice rising above the chaos, steady as steel. "History will not remember the insults you spit in anger. It will remember the lives you abandoned. It will remember the truth you tried to bury. And it will remember who stood in this chamber and said, 'Enough.'" The crowd erupted again, this time with chants of her name. "Jasmine, Jasmine." The sound rolled like thunder, deafening, unstoppable. Trump pounded the desk again, his face a storm of fury, but his blows only made him smaller, weaker, drowned in the tide he could no longer command. And as Jasmine stood tall, unbroken, her words still burning in the air, one question hung heavy over the nation watching. When insults fail and fury collapses, what weapon does a strong man have left? The screen split in two, the broadcast transforming into a dual broadcast live to millions. On the left, Donald Trump hunched over the desk, his skin glistening under the heat of the spotlights. On the right, Jasmine Crockett, steady, unflinching, her eyes sharp as steel. The tension was unbearable, like two gunslingers at high noon. Jasmine struck first, her voice firing questions with the precision of bullets. "Why did you abandon veterans who lost their limbs fighting for this country?" She didn't wait for an answer. "Why did you lie about your taxes while Americans worked 2 jobs just to survive?" Another blow landed. "Why did you silence voters, shutting the doors of democracy in their faces?" Each question snapped through the chamber, the rhythm relentless, leaving no room to breathe, no space to escape. Trump could take no more. His chair screeched against the marble as he lurched forward, his face flushed crimson, spit catching at the corner of his mouth as he hammered his fist into the desk. "She's unqualified," he barked, his voice cracking but wild, a fraud, an embarrassment to Congress, an embarrassment to America. Each insult hurled like a stone, desperate, venomous, meant to shatter the woman standing across from him. His words bounced off the chamber walls, hollow, echoes of a man who once thrived on domination, but now sounded more like a cornered animal lashing out. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even some of his own allies winced, the ugliness of the attack too raw, too revealing. The gallery buzzed with anger, shouts rising from the rafters, but Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she leaned back slightly, a laugh escaping her lips, sharp, deliberate, disarming. It wasn't the laugh of dismissal. It was the laugh of someone who had already won. Her eyes narrowed, her smile cutting like a blade. "Dead or unqualified in your eyes, Mr. Trump, then. Unworthy in histories." The words detonated in the chamber like dynamite. The audience roared, their applause and chants shaking the room with a force no gavel could control. The camera zoomed in, catching Trump's face as it twisted from rage into something closer to fear. A flicker, brief but undeniable. Jasmine pressed on, her voice rising above the chaos, steady as steel. "History will not remember the insults you spit in anger. It will remember the lives you abandoned. It will remember the truth you tried to bury. And it will remember who stood in this chamber and said, 'Enough.'" The crowd erupted again, this time with chants of her name. "Jasmine, Jasmine." The sound rolled like thunder, deafening, unstoppable. Trump pounded the desk again, his face a storm of fury, but his blows only made him smaller, weaker, drowned in the tide he could no longer command. And as Jasmine stood tall, unbroken, her words still burning in the air, one question hung heavy over the nation watching. When insults fail and fury collapses, what weapon does a strong man have left? The screen split in two, the broadcast transforming into a dual broadcast live to millions. On the left, Donald Trump hunched over the desk, his skin glistening under the heat of the spotlights. On the right, Jasmine Crockett, steady, unflinching, her eyes sharp as steel. The tension was unbearable, like two gunslingers at high noon. Jasmine struck first, her voice firing questions with the precision of bullets. Why did you abandon veterans who lost their limbs fighting for this country? She didn't wait for an answer. Why did you lie about your taxes while Americans work 2 jobs just to survive? Another blow landed. Why did you silence voters, shutting the doors of democracy in their faces? Each question snapped through the chamber. Trump could take no more. His chair screeched against the marble as he lurched forward, his face flushed crimson, spit catching at the corner of his mouth as he hammered his fist into the desk. She's unqualified, he barked, his voice cracking but wild, a fraud, an embarrassment to Congress, an embarrassment to America. Each insult hurled like a stone, desperate, venomous, meant to shatter the woman standing across from him. His words bounced off the chamber walls, hollow, echoes of a man who once thrived on domination, but now sounded more like a cornered animal lashing out. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even some of his own allies winced, the ugliness of the attack too raw, too revealing. The gallery buzzed with anger, shouts rising from the rafters, but Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she leaned back slightly, a laugh escaping her lips, sharp, deliberate, disarming. It wasn't the laugh of dismissal. It was the laugh of someone who had already won. Her eyes narrowed, her smile cutting like a blade. Dead or unqualified in your eyes, Mr. Trump, then. Unworthy in histories. The words detonated in the chamber like dynamite. The audience roared, their applause and chants shaking the room with a force no gavel could control. The camera zoomed in, catching Trump's face as it twisted from rage into something closer to fear. A flicker, brief but undeniable. Jasmine pressed on, her voice rising above the chaos, steady as steel. History will not remember the insults you spit in anger. It will remember the lives you abandoned. It will remember the truth you tried to bury. And it will remember who stood in this chamber and said, enough. The night pressed in around the Capitol, but the crowd outside burned brighter than any spotlight. Jasmine stood on the marble steps, framed against the pillars where power had once seemed untouchable, her voice steady yet fierce, carrying into the roar of thousands. Justice belongs to the people, she declared, her words not just spoken but carved into the air. Not to the cowards who hide behind lies, not to the strongmen who tremble when truth finds them. Justice belongs to you. The crowd erupted, the sound rolling like thunder across the city. She stepped closer, her eyes scanning the faces lined with struggle, with sacrifice, with hope. If your voice is silenced, she asked, her tone sharpening into a challenge, will you rise or will you stay silent? The silence that followed was alive, electric, not emptiness, but anticipation, as though every soul was holding its breath, weighing the question against their own lives. The cameras caught the moment, the mother clutching her child tighter, the veteran standing straighter, the student's fist raised defiantly. This wasn't just a hearing anymore. It was a call to arms of the spirit, a reminder that democracy only lived as long as its people were willing to fight for it. Jasmine raised her hand high, not in triumph, but in defiance, in solidarity, her voice echoing into history. If it were your family's future on the line, would you fight back or bow down? The roar that answered was deafening, a single wordless cry that shook the Capitol to its foundations. And as the night swallowed the sound and carried it across America, one truth became undeniable. Silence was no longer an option. True courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to rise when silence would be easier. Jasmine Stan reminds us that power only bends when ordinary people refuse to look away, refuse to back down, and insist that truth be heard. In our own lives, whether in our workplace, our community, or even in our families, justice begins when someone dares to speak. For those who cannot, the question is, when your voice is tested, will you rise and fight, or will you stay silent? Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.